Oh, okay. All right, perfect. So hopefully you all can see my screen here, right? M7 Bootcamp. All right. So want to talk today, like the goal of today, right, is for me to share as many nuggets about sort of the application process for M7 schools as possible. So I'm super excited to be here, super excited to be with you all and share some tips. So a little bit about my background. I'm a project leader at BCG. I got my MBA from Chicago Booth. And while I was there, I was super involved in admissions. So I was an admissions fellow. I really like the MBA admissions process. I liked going through it myself personally just because I feel like it's a really kind of introspective time of life and tends to pull out a lot of there's a lot, like I learned a lot about myself sort of going through the process. I also like really wanted to get in, and so I think like I was really hopeful that I would get into to one of my target programs, and then was super excited to get admitted to a few schools and go to the welcome weekends, and like it was just an amazing experience from then on. So since I enjoy admissions so much, I have been an admissions coach and MBA admissions consultant for about 4 years now on a couple of different platforms. So I primarily work with folks in the applying to the M7 schools, but have done probably all like almost all the schools, top 20 schools in the US, and then several schools internationally as well. And I live in Dallas, so it's like nice and warm here in Dallas. So to anybody like freezing in Boston, I'm sorry. Um, so my goal for this session is to just go through like each sort of step of the process, and just share with you a bunch of kind of nuggets of knowledge for you to think about across each of these different areas. And it's like questions I commonly get from clients or areas where I see a lot of applicants, get tripped up, or just like how to think about things maybe in a way that will take your application to the next level. Um, so this is like just hopefully packed with a ton of information about how to be successful as you're working through your applications. But my hope is that we can make this interactive. So far, you all have been pretty quiet, but I would love to get questions. You can put them in the chat. I have the chat open, or if you want to come off mute and be brave and ask me like across any of the portions of the application or even the process holistically. Like honestly, it's a pretty small group here. And I would love to like tailor this and make it as helpful to you as humanly possible. That's the goal. So no questions are out of bounds. Maybe like I'll try to pause, throughout the entire process, and any questions that you have, like please ask them, and I'm here to support you. So any questions before we start? All right, let's dive into it. So the first part of the process, and I would say a part that a lot of applicants who are going at it alone uh, miss, is developing a strategy. So one of the first things I do with each of my clients is like think holistically about sort of their application strategy. So a couple of things you should know about the application process. The first is the admissions committee is going to look at each portion of your application like holistically. They don't review the resume first and then the essays and then the interview as like distinct pieces. They review them all and are extrapolating different pieces of information about your profile to create like a comprehensive profile. And why do I say that, or why does it matter? Because a lot of applicants, when they're writing the essays, they're thinking about the prompt and like what they want to say about that prompt. And then when they're working through their resume, it's like, okay, where have I worked? What experiences have I had? And like tailoring those bullets. And while that's fine, there you do run the risk that you will just have like gaps in sort of the core things that they're looking for, and how you like check all those boxes in your profile. So what I recommend is to take a step back, think about sort of the core areas that they're looking for. Think about what in your background you bring and your experiences, both from like an education background, also from a professional background, and then also just personally, like if you're involved in a church community, or if you play tennis or club soccer, or like whatever sort of community means to you, that you think about, like make sure you include that as well across these different dimensions. So I can't share all the specifics for the specifics of what the admissions committee was looking for at Booth when I was working there, because I signed a confidentiality agreement. But I will share these kind of high level points, which are true across all of the M7 schools, and invariably incredibly important. So the first is leadership experiences. So they want to see demonstrated leadership, not just that you like aspire to be a good leader, but that you've already had leadership experience. And I would say, like, folks, you can get creative in sort of how this comes through. I think a lot of people feel some pressure if they don't have like direct management experience in their career, but leadership can like look like a lot of different things. So I would, spend some time thinking about what leadership experiences you've had, what type of leader you are, like how you motivate people, um, and what leadership, like what good leadership means to you. Like if you had to describe it in 3 words, what 3 words would you use? Teamwork, how do you collaborate with others? So business school is chock full with group work and all kinds of like team activities. And so they want to get a sense of like, what role do you take in teams? Are you a contributor? Why do you value teamwork? And what experiences do you have to sort of like back that up? Problem solving approach, how you approach complex problems. I think part of this could be problems you've approached that like you were not successful, um, and also problems that you had to overcome, or were successful. A lot of applicants that I work with, they oftentimes like initially think about this just like quantitative, like your quantitative ability to like build a model, or solve those types of problems. But this can be very broad. So I was working with an applicant earlier today, for example, who's a military applicant, just leaving the military, and he was a platoon leader, and was made aware of like I had to sort of solve this problem of contention in his platoon. And after kind of digging into things, what he found was that there had been sexual assault among some of the people in the platoon, and he had to sort of like uncover that, and then work with the different parties to resolve it, and kind of work through that. So that's like problem solving again can be very varied in what it looks like, but they want to see sort of how you think through problems and how you tackle very difficult complex problems, and frankly like how you deal with when you try to solve a problem and you're not successful, or how to deal with failure. Values and ethics, they want to get a sense for what matters to you, what your guiding principles are for your life. And then experiences with diversity. What does diversity mean to you? Why is it important to honor people's diversity, and to understand it? And then career ambitions, which I will say probably all of you, or most of you, are familiar with it in some form, that they're going to ask you about your career goals. But I would push you on the career goals to think. You need to really think about how they fit together. So what have you done so far in your career to date? What have you learned from that? What do you want to do immediately after your MBA? And how will an MBA sort of help you get that? So what skills do you have? What skills do you currently lack that you're hoping to achieve by getting an MBA? And how will that inform both your short and your long-term goals? And then also, will your short-term goals, like help you prepare to achieve your long-term ambition or not? So all of that sort of needs to fit together in a cohesive story or a narrative that makes sense. And then you can layer on top of that for each school, why that school. So if you're applying to HBS, you can talk about why Harvard is uniquely positioned to sort of help you overcome the specific areas that you need to develop to achieve your goals. So let me pause here. So just saw the question in the chat. We can share the recording after. Yes, absolutely. So let me pause here a little bit on the strategy. Any questions about like thinking just holistically about sort of the application strategy or the sum of the different parts or all of the different areas that you need to highlight to come across as a compelling candidate? You guys are killing me. Does leadership have to be directly related to the job you do? So that is a great question, and the answer is no, it doesn't. Leadership could be, I'm working with another applicant right now where her main leadership experience is she was like in student government in multiple different roles in her undergrad. And so like one of her recommenders is the dean of the school that she went to. And she's spending like a lot of sort of the leadership real estate talking about the initiatives that she was driving, how she got consensus across the group, what campaigning was like, how to sort of like listen to and keep all of these interested parties informed. Um, so it doesn't have to be relate directly to your career experience at all. For most applicants, it does, but it certainly doesn't need to. Um, all right. Who should your recommenders be? So that's a great question. We're going to talk about the letters of recommendation here in a sec, and we can talk about selecting the recommenders. That's a great question. All right. Let's okay, getting some questions. What kind of proof can we submit besides recommendation letters? That's also a good question. So sometimes applicants will, if you have like a friend or somebody in the program, you can ask them to like submit a recommendation on your behalf. It's honestly not that necessary. Like I would say, you don't really need that much more sort of proof behind your application outside of the official letters of recommendation. All right, great question from Sean here. Where do extracurriculars fit into the strategy? So that's an outstanding question, and honestly, like something I encourage you all to think about. So, like you can think of these as sort of like the meta themes of your application. Now, what tools do you have at your disposal, to showcase these different attributes? So you have the letters of recommendation, you have the resume, you have the essays, you're going to have your interview. In the application portal, there's also an opportunity to talk about the activities you're involved in or these extracurriculars. And you can use those to highlight leadership experience, teamwork, like like I mentioned, if you're involved in a club soccer team, something like that. Problem solving. Another aspect of the application that matters, kind of with the diversity and with the values and ethics, is like what community means to you. Each of these schools are trying to build a community on campus that they have 50% turnover every year. And so they're really interested in finding folks who care about community and are going to contribute meaningfully to the community on campus. And so you can use those activities to kind of highlight that as well. All right. Let's maybe dive into a couple of the other sections, and then we can hit a few more of these questions. So appreciate you all sending these in. I want to try to get to as many of these as possible. All right. So just real quick on building the resume, let me give you a couple of tips, and then we can go deeper on any other questions you have relating to the resume. So there is like a very standard resume format for MBA admissions. And when I was an admissions fellow, I would say probably 95% of the applications that I reviewed had this standard format. So you have like a professional experience section that typically has like a line underneath it. Then you have, an education section up top, then a professional experience section, and then an additional information section. So just 3 sections. Talk about your jobs or your education, any extracurriculars in your education, then your professional experience, and all your involvement, all your achievements, everything in your professional experience, and then in additional you can put honors you've received, papers you've published. I typically recommend, and most applicants will put as the last bullet, just like hobbies. I worked with a candidate once who like kept bees and like got honey out of the bees from the bees, and so from the beehives, and so he like wrote about that. A lot of applicants put travel. When I was an admissions fellow, I got a little sick of seeing travel, to be honest, because like everybody loves to travel, and it's kind of like a say you like or have money without saying you have money. So I kind of I don't know. I think it's actually not that interesting. I would probably stay away from like you want to bring something that's unique that they will remember you. The goal of you're trying to in the interview you want to strike up a conversation about some hobby or shared interest or something. Um, and honestly, like everybody in business school loves to travel, so it's just not that interesting. So those are the three sections, and then just like a few kind of housekeeping tips, but honestly are pretty important. You want to highlight key experiences that you have. Try to keep it focused on like really tangible outcomes. So content that that is not great is something that says like, I improved the community of this group, or I brought anything that's sort of vague and very difficult to prove is not going to be effective. So much more effective would be like I raised $10,000 for this purpose, or I built this model that achieved this thing. And the more quantitative you can make the outcomes, the better. Think about the action verbs. A lot of people who read resumes, like myself included, it's like you kind of skim like the first part of the bullet, and then you can kind of get a sense for how interested you are. And so honestly, like you want to front load the content as much as possible in each bullet, so that it's really high impact. Avoid industry jargon. A lot of there are words or jargon you think might not be industry jargon because you're just like everybody would know this. The admissions committee probably doesn't. And even some of the folks second year students or whoever who may be reading your resume, they could have a completely different background, right? Not non-business background. And so they don't have insight into some of these technical terms. You want to show career progression or leadership progression or advancement sort of across your professional life as much as possible. And that can mean different things. Like it doesn't need to mean promotions, though it's great if you've been promoted. But it can also just mean like increase in responsibility or increase in trust from leadership. And then be concise. So oftentimes when I'm working with clients, like I would say this is probably not as important up front. Like as you're kind of going through, focus on content first, but then at the end, you just want to get everything as pithy as possible. So it's easy to read, easy to comprehend, and they can sort of digest as much information as possible without too much effort. So, any question on resumes specifically? So, great question. Can the resume be more than one page? So, and for deferred applicants, the answer is yes, it can be more than one page. And I would say like that's true for deferred applicants as well. Though I would honestly ask yourself if you need all the content on the 2 pages. But if you've had professional experiences and like a ton of leadership experiences to speak to, it can be on 2 pages. Yes. Any other questions? I'll just answer your other question that I see here. Does leadership matter more than stats, or are they equally important? So the career, like the narrative, like what I'm talking to you about, the strategy matters way more than the stats, which is something that I think applicants don't always realize, and honestly, probably could index on more. And I think the reason why folks tend to focus on the stats is because it's like very transparent and it's very measurable. So if you want to know what your standing is, like I can tell you the median GMAT score, and you can see what your GMAT score is and try to assess. But I saw folks at Booth with like a 750, 760 that got rejected, and I saw folks at Booth with like a 680 that got accepted. So it's not, and and I would say like across your GPA and across the GMAT or GRE, really they're just looking for like, can you are you going to be able to keep up with the academics with the million other things going on during school, and are you going to be able to like raise your hand and share insightful comments in the classroom, really be able to contribute again to that community that exists inside of the classroom. And like that's it. Maybe like a really high GMAT score, like a 770, 780, 790, will get you some extra points, because I think that they want to manage sort of their averages and yield and competitiveness of the program. So maybe it helps you like a little bit. I kind of think of it, or encourage folks to think of it as like a check plus, check minus, where it's like if your scores are too low, it's going to be a check minus, and you have to have really strong narrative, but you certainly can get in. Like absolutely can get in. And I've helped a ton of applicants get in with like really low GMAT scores or Fs on their transcript, or both. And then if you have those qualifications, that's like a check. And then maybe if you have a 4.0 and a 780, like that's going to be a check plus. But much more important is all of this, like sort of the narrative, why you want to go, showcasing your personality, demonstrating some vulnerability, and highlighting all of these core areas that I'm speaking to here. All right, hopefully that was helpful. Are promotions necessary to show progression? No, they're not. It's one way to show progression, but there are a lot of other ways. It could be additional responsibilities. It could be moving from one company to another company, and then showing how your role changed or how the scope of your role changed. So you can show progression a lot of different ways. I have never seen a resume that was not an 8.5 by 11. So I don't know if it officially needs to be in that letter size. But I will say I've probably looked at like 500 or more admissions resumes, and I've never seen one that's not 8.5 by 11. All right. Oh, this is a great question. Compared to full-time, just part-time MBA applications, look at certain things more specifically. I would say it is slightly different. For the purposes of this session, maybe send me a message on Leyland, and I can give you more information on that. Because I would like to help answer that one. All right. Do they print out resumes to reviews, everything done in PDF? So that's a great question. So when they're reviewing the application, it's done in the portal on PDF. They will print your resume and give it to the interviewer when you have an interview. And then I think that's the only time they print the resume. Yeah. So the rest is all done just via the portal on the computer. All right, let's keep going. So selecting your recommenders. I think we had some good questions on this, so I'm going to try to hit on the key points here, and then you all can jump in. So you want to select, ideally, if possible, you want to select your direct manager. He or she will be like best positioned to sort of speak to your immediate candidacy and qualifications. So that's the reason why I would say, if you have not disclosed that you're applying, or you don't want to select your manager for some other reason, maybe you don't have like a great relationship, or you feel like they wouldn't give you that great of a review, like don't worry at all about that. I've helped folks navigate that situation all the time. In the application portal, you can talk about why you selected the recommenders that you did, and it's pretty easy to just say, I haven't disclosed that I've made the decision to apply, and for that reason, like did not select my direct manager. But if you have a good relationship with your manager, I recommend asking him or her to write your recommendation, because it will probably be pretty strong. And then for your other one, for most of the schools, they have two. You can do a peer, like a colleague that you've worked for. You can do an informal mentor if there's somebody that's sort of guided you through your career. You can do who else? I had done a startup with like a friend of mine, kind of on the side, that we were moonlighting. And he was an alum of one of the schools that I was applying to, and so I asked him to write mine. I'm trying to think what else I see. Um, yeah, that's maybe I'll stop there. But you can reach out if you have specific questions about who to select. Um, just a few tips on the recommender process. I think the first piece of advice I would give is like the onus really falls on you to sort of manage the process. And this is something that a lot of applicants don't realize. So if you just ask somebody to write you a recommendation, then you're sort of turning over to them a significant portion of the application and your fate. So how do you sort of help manage the narrative? Well, you can give them a packet, right, that says like, here are the deadlines for the recommendation. Here's the schools that I'm applying to. Here's the questions you're going to be asked. And then here's a few things that I'm trying to highlight in my profile. And to the extent that you feel comfortable, I would love it if you could highlight some of these things. I often recommend folks that to go, like, if you're using your direct manager, go back through your previous performance reviews and pull out anecdotes of things that they literally wrote about you that align with the things that you want them to highlight, and then share those with them and be like, here's something you've said about me in the past. If you're open to sharing something like this is kind of what I'm looking for, right? And it's like you're not putting words in their mouth or anything. It's, this is feedback they've already given you, but it allows you to sort of control the narrative about what gets put into the recommendation. All right, a couple other tips. I recommend you encourage them to highlight attributes first. So I read some recommendations that are like, here's an example of how Hillary, is servant leaders say. Much better is to say like, Hillary really leads by supporting other people and demonstrating a servant leadership mindset. I've seen that over and over. Here's one example to demonstrate that. So you want to lead as much as possible with the attribute, or you want to encourage your recommender to lead as much as possible with the attributes that you want them to highlight, and then to give examples to support those. That will help structure the narrative so that they feel like they're getting to know you personally instead of just hearing little anecdotes about your experiences together. And then the last piece is think strategically about what qualities you want them to highlight. So I'll give you like the sort of stereotypical example. Everybody thinks they're a good leader, right? Anybody applying to business school is probably not going to say, oh, I'm a terrible leader. And so it's not that helpful actually for you to say in your own application that you're a strong leader. But it is super helpful to have your current direct manager say, Hillary is an incredible leader. I've been blown away by her ability to lead in a direct capacity, but also just have direct influence across a very dynamic group of stakeholders. Like, that will have so much more meaning than anything you could say about your own leadership abilities, right? So you want to think about what are those outside in attributes that would be super helpful to get an outside endorsement across those core areas that I highlighted at the beginning of the session. All right, let me just jump in and see how are LORs delivered. Can I ask my recommender to give me a signed copy, send them to schools myself? All right, great question. So it doesn't really have much time. So the way that the letters of recommendation are delivered is you will put your recommender's email address in, and then they will email a link directly to your recommender. They click on that link, and it sends them into the portal, like a different view than what you have when you're applying in the portal, and they will answer the questions. And for many schools, they rate you across key criteria. So it'll say like leadership, how is Hillary? Like 1 to 5, 1 being the best and 5 being like 1's like top 2%, 2 is top 10%, 3 is top 30%, and they'll just kind of do that. And so they have to select it in a drop down. Most of the schools ask the same questions. Wharton, unfortunately, does not. They have like a couple of random stupid ones. But for most schools, the questions are really the same. So you can go and like Google and get all the questions and kind of make it easy for your recommender. You cannot submit it on their behalf, just to answer your question there. But a lot of recommenders, like, it's not uncommon for the recommenders to oftentimes like to sort of you're not supposed to manage the narrative or review the recommendation or change it or anything. And you sign something when it's submitted that you haven't written any portion of it, or anything like that. But I will say it's not uncommon for my clients to have their recommenders send the recommendation to me, and I will give them feedback directly to help strengthen the letter of recommendation before they submit it. Oftentimes, my client that way we're able to sort of keep the applicant out of the loop, so that they are withholding or maintaining sort of the standards of the school. But oftentimes recommenders want to write something really compelling. They don't know exactly what the school is looking for, so I can I help support in that way. So hopefully that answers your question there. How would that change for 2x2 applicants? It's a great question. You as a deferred applicant, you really want to demonstrate sort of maturity and real awareness around your career ambitions, more so than a traditional applicant. So I would think about how your recommender can help you showcase that sort of awareness around your career, maturity around your career, and clarity around sort of your ambitions. Is it preferable to have work supervisor instead of academics for LOR for deferred students? That's a great point. So for deferred applicants, I would definitely have an academic letter of recommendation if you have somebody, a professor, dean, or somebody you work closely with that can write it. That will certainly strengthen your application. I would say whether to have a supervisor or not, I would say it depends on the quality of the experiences that you've had or professional experiences. So if you have specific questions about that one, shoot me a message and we can talk offline. Are there portions of these recommendations going to affect the outcome, or is it just the narrative? The positions absolutely affect the outcome, like 100%. Yes. Rodrigo, current supervisor is preferred. But if your current supervisor again is not aware that you're applying, like I would not sweat over it in the slightest. Like previous supervisor is fine, especially if your current supervisor is somebody you worked for like 6 months and your previous supervisor you worked for 3 years. In that case, I would say go with your previous supervisor. So you kind of need to think about the relationship as well. Are all the processes like Think 10, T20, or just are all of the processes like that? Yeah. I mean, the process, where they rate, most schools will have the recommenders rate. So not all of them, but most of them, yes. Okay. I'm just looking at the time. Let's keep moving. I want to make sure we kind of get through everything, and then I'm happy to stick around and take any questions y'all have. So just quickly, some anecdotes on essays. Essays are probably the part that people spend the most time on, and I would say appropriately so. It's probably the most important part of the application for a few reasons. One is like when I read essays, and like when I was an admissions fellow, it's pretty clear like whether it's something they threw together in a week or whether it's something they put like real thought into. And how do you demonstrate that thought? You want to really showcase creativity and you want your personality to come through. So where do I see essays kind of go wrong? Like I would say you want to like do some soul searching. Like what's unique about your background? What's unique about your experiences? And how can you like demonstrate some vulnerability or really bring out sort of something unique to you, something honest and something that will resonate with them and that they'll be able to remember. That's very important. So it's sort of a good opportunity for you to showcase creativity. And if you all are familiar with Fuqua's essay about like they just have like 25 statements about you to submit, it kind of showcases the need for that creativity, right? Where you have to just kind of really think about like who am I on paper? Like if I had to write 25 things about me, what would I say? And I would challenge you to bring that same level of rigor to every single school. I really strongly encourage you. I'm going to say this, and I know some of you are going to do it anyway. I strongly encourage you not to use one essay across multiple schools. So unlike the letters of recommendation, where the universities try to make them the same to make your recommender's life simple, the essays, honestly, they're sort of trying to do the opposite, where it's not like GSB doesn't know what HBS's prompt is or Chicago Booth. And if you look at the essay prompts, certainly across the M7 schools, they're very different from each other. Like if you take an essay like how will you contribute to the community at Wharton, And there's no real way to convert that into an essay around like how will Chicago Booth help you achieve your career goals. And so just don't try. It's not going to work, and it's going to fall like pretty flat. So I think some of the general ideas, like around like what is your narrative, what are your career ambitions, what aspects of your personality or background do you want to have come through, those obviously should stay the same. But when you're thinking about sort of constructing it and how you tell the story and sort of the sequencing, the flow of the essay, that really needs to come from the ground up for the essays in order for them to really be effective. All right, there's typically a career essay for most schools. On the career narrative, it really needs to make sense. So you need to talk about what are your ambitions, why you need an MBA, why you need an MBA is an area that folks often miss. You need to talk about like what are your sort of deficiencies. If I asked you the question, like you tell me your career ambitions, if I said, why don't you go do that stuff right now? Like, why do you even need to get an MBA? Why can't you just go do that stuff? You should have an answer for that. And that's sort of what's coming through in the why you need an MBA, right? What are you missing to just go do these things? And then why the school, or you can then tailor sort of the rest of the narrative directly to their prompt. And maybe just as a general piece of advice, I would say like really focus, like laser focus on what their prompt is. So they write these prompts very deliberately. If they tell you to talk outside of work, don't talk about work, and I would just make sure that your essay is sort of holistically encapsulates their question and answers it in a comprehensive way. All right, I mentioned like utilize vulnerability. You really want to showcase your personality, like what makes you you. They're trying to get to know you, and that's really important to get admitted, right? And so this is hard for some folks because maybe you're not used to writing about some of the more personal aspects of your life, but it is important. So I would challenge you to really think about that. And then maybe just as a last like kind of tactical point, I always start with my clients with outlines. I always say don't worry about the word count. If it's a 650 word essay, like shoot for 800-900 words and just focus on getting the content right and really focus on making sure the points are right. Focus on how creative the writing is, how you're telling the story, and then you can go in and like trim it down 20% very easily. And then it will come across like a very polished, very refined narrative where every sentence is there, intentionally and deliberately and serves a purpose. So let me pause there with the essays. What questions do you have, or what would be most helpful? When should we start working on the essays? Applying for schools in the fall. So if you're applying for round 1 in September, it depends on how many schools you're applying to. Because honestly, the essays is probably the thing that you can rush the least without having it just flat out come through. And I would say I would probably give it like 3 or so weeks for each set of essays for each school. So if you're applying to 4 schools, like you can kind of do the math backward on when you would need to be finished with the essays to sort of go through and put everything in the application portal, plus like do all the activities and fill out all the short answers and all that stuff and get them submitted on time. How many schools to apply to is an outstanding question. It really depends on how much time you have. And there's a lot of strategy around where to apply and how many to apply. I typically work with I would say I work with folks on somewhere between 3 to 5 schools usually, and then they typically will do somewhere around 1 to 3 schools without me, just to sort of manage the cost. So what is that? That's like anywhere from like 4 to 7, probably, I would say. And that would be like a combination of like 1 or 2 sort of stretch, and then maybe 1 to 2 safety or safety-ish schools, and then several that you feel like you're kind of right in the sweet spot for. All right, how do we decide whether to apply round 1 or round 2? I would say if you can apply round 1, I would apply round 1. It's the easiest to get in. If you are not ready and need more time, then you can apply to round 2. You can also break it up. I often break up the rounds with my clients. So, we'll do like three that are super important in round one, and then three or four in round two. So that's totally doable. Are there any harms to applying a deferred program benefits to waiting until having more experience? No, I would apply deferred if you are able and ready and willing. Because if you don't get in, you can always apply later, and they don't frown upon that. So, all right. Any other essay questions? Maybe I'll keep us moving just to be cognizant of time. So now we'll just talk for a little bit about interviews, and I'll try to keep moving so we have plenty of time to answer any other questions. Jessica, this is a great question, so I'm just going to answer this one last one. I recommend doing them distinctly. So I would work on one set of essays for one school first, and then move to a separate school. And why do I say that? It's because to write an essay very well actually takes like a decent amount of thought and work, and sometimes ideas or creative moments will come to you at 2 a.m. And so it just requires like some full sort of dedication to it. So my advice is, think through like the general story you want to tell. Like, what are the themes? What do you bring? What's your background, right? Are you like somebody who, your parents were in the military, so you moved around a ton, or you're somebody who immigrated to a new country when you were a kid, or like, what's kind of your story? You can think through that narrative. And then I would sort of take one school. What are the questions that they're asking? How do you showcase sort of the pieces that the story that you want to tell, and then put together that outline, and then really work on refining it. And I recommend getting it at least to 80%. So to that point, I said where like maybe you're 20-30% over the word count, but you feel good about the narrative, the way that it's written, the content that's included. Get it to that point before you move on. And then if you want to kind of polish it up while you're starting another one, that's fine. Like, that's easy to do. But I wouldn't bounce too much between them, or you'll lose some momentum there. So hopefully that helps. All right. On interviews, you want to schedule your interview sort of when's best for you. So I'm 100% a morning person, so I did mine in the morning. But I was doing a mock interview with a client today, and he's an afternoon or evening person, so he scheduled his in the afternoon. So it's really whatever's best for you. Don't do anything stupid with your appearance. You don't dress too casually. Like, this is a big deal. Like, you're spending money, you're spending a bunch of time to get in. Like, don't blow it on something distracting. Hopefully you are all familiar with the STARO framework. So this is like a way that you tell a story. You start with the situation and the tasks that needed to be accomplished, the actions that you took, the results of the actions, and then in some cases, doesn't need to be in every case, but in some cases, the lessons that you learned. So my advice is to think about the core stories that you plan to share. And when you get closer to interviews, like, I'm happy to share like some core areas or elements that they will invariably ask you about. I have a interview document that I wrote for Leland that has sort of all the core interview areas that they're going to ask. And so this is really something you can know everything that they're going to ask going in, and there doesn't need to be any real surprises. The exact question that they ask, you won't know, but like how you're going to answer it, you will have already prepared. So you can sort of prepare all these experiences, then structure them in this framework, and then practice telling them in such a way that it's just, they come so naturally to you. And then when you're in the interview, you can take their specific questions. So maybe they say something like, what does leadership mean to you? Or maybe they say something like, what are 3 words that one of your direct reports would use to describe your leadership? Or maybe they say something like, tell me a time that you've worked for a great leader. All 3 of those questions can be answered with the same information. And in the interview, because you know your experience and the qualities and the meta themes that you want to share really well, you can just focus on the question they're asking and how you tailor that content to answer that very specific question. What else? Leadership and ethics will invariably come up. Practice interviewing in realistic settings. I see applicants who will like practice with their friends, and then they feel super ready, and then they get into the interview, and it's actually not like one of your really good friends on the other side of the table. So I would try to practice in settings, like I dressed up in my mock interviews because I hate wearing suits, and so I was like, I'm gonna feel stuffy in the real thing. I want to feel stuffy when I'm practicing. So, try to make it as real as possible. You can do mocks with folks on Leland. I do mocks all the time to try to make it more real and kind of simulate some of that stress or anxiety that you'll feel. Be thoughtful about the questions. Please do not ask them questions that you can Google. Please do not ask them questions that don't matter. Like, I wouldn't ask them, like, why did you choose to come to GSB? Because it's like, why do you care? Like, it doesn't really matter. So you want to think about questions that tie to your narrative, and they can either, tie to your background. They can showcase sort of your awareness of the program or interest in the program, and are very specific and relate to the interviewer. When you ask a question, like, listen to their answer and try to strike up a conversation. So the Q&A is often at the end. So it's a great time for you to sort of end on a conversational note. And then, I recommend always following up with a personalized thank you. I know that's like a little, maybe feels a little outdated or old fashioned, but it's 100% standard in MBA admissions interviews. What's a good example of a good question to ask? That's a great question. So I did a mock interview earlier today, and was helping the candidate come up with some questions. So I'll give you an example. So a poor question, as I mentioned, would be like, why did you choose to come to Booth? A good question would be, I was visiting or walking around the business building before the interview with one of my friends who's a student, and she showed me some of the famous art that's in the Harper Center. And one piece in particular she showed me is that sign that you have by the stairs that says, "Why are you here and not somewhere else?" And so that, that kind of intrigues me and has made me think about sort of my commitment to Chicago Booth. But I would love to hear, why you chose this program and not to go somewhere else. So really, you're asking the same question around, like, why did you come here? But in a way that demonstrates that, you're very committed to the program. You've learned something very specific that, can't be asked at a GSB. And you've taken the time to sort of get a feel for the culture, integrate yourself with the students, and sort of do all that legwork. So does that help, Daisy? Hopefully that helps. Are interviews done in person or everything over Teams Zoom? Most schools are doing both. I recommend you go in person for the schools that you really want to get into. Obviously, for most folks, it's not feasible to go to all of them, which is fine. But I would kind of be thoughtful about which ones you're going to invest going in person. Let's see. Should questions be mostly about the interviewer's experience or the program itself? You can ask both. Either one is really fine. I would just sort of be thoughtful in how you phrase it to achieve the outcomes that I mentioned before. All right, let's see. So maybe just a couple more thoughts here for you. So just some general advice. I mentioned this at the beginning. Be thoughtful about how each part of your application sort of fits in and contributes to this overall narrative. I can't emphasize this enough. It's really hard for applicants, I think, because you are in the weeds on all these things. But as much as possible, like, try to just step back. This is honestly why I think a consultant really can be helpful, is because you want to take that sort of high level view of, like, how are all these different pieces fit together. Bring out your unique personality as much as possible. And this is like my favorite, by far my favorite part of doing this is, like, anytime I work with a different client, it's a different story, it's a different personality, it's a different background, and I love getting to know them. And I felt this same sort of kind of joy as an admissions fellow at Booth too. So I would say, like, that's the part that they are going to be looking for, is, like, at some point, if you can share something that connects with them in a way that maybe, like, they feel some of your pain about a time that you failed or a time that you went through something difficult, and that affects them, right, as they're reading about it or hearing about it in an interview. Maybe at some point you share something that sort of makes them laugh, right, about your background. You want to kind of, like, just connect with them on more of an emotional level. Carefully choose the extracurriculars, the activities, and in general, the content that you highlight across the different components of the application. So one mistake that I see a lot of applicants make is they sort of get siloed on, like, this is my story. And while I think that's important, you want to show some sort of diversity across each of the different components so that you're actually building a comprehensive narrative. So if like I have a client, for example, whose career narrative centers around advancing mental health. He just submitted all of his applications in round two. Um, and his career narrative all fits around mental health. So my advice to him is, when you're talking about extracurriculars or when you're doing a video essay, you want to not talk about that. You want to talk about other things, that are other aspects of who you are, your personality, just so they feel like they really get to know you. And then maybe like one last point I'll say after doing this for several years is just to like be thoughtful about the advice that you're getting. I do recommend getting advice about your application because I think you don't know what you don't know, and there's sort of like blind spots or things you might not be aware of. But I also think if you're getting advice from friends or family who didn't get an MBA, they might actually not know that much about the admissions committee's criteria. And I also think that most students who get admitted honestly don't have full transparency into why they even got admitted. And so even an admitted school or admitted student to one of your target schools, like may or may not know whether a piece of your application aligns with what the admissions committee is looking for. And so I think it's more important to get very high quality feedback on your application than just getting sort of 10 different conflicting views from folks who may or may not know. So that's it from an advice standpoint. I'll kind of give my pitch. I love working with folks, right? I would love to work with any of you. If you're interested in working together, I sort of go through every part of the application together, and have a comprehensive package here, and have a. This is the first time I'm doing something like this, but I'm doing $200 off for folks in this event. So if you all are interested in working together, I'm willing to do that for you. So let me pause there. Any other questions in the last 5 minutes or anything I can help with in the time that we have left? I'm getting one question, is a direct message, but I'll just kind of paraphrase it around if it's worth sort of applying to M7, or if it's like, is it worth sort of doing in the extra work, or is it fine to sort of go to like a UCLA or another school? And I would say, I would try to get into the best school that you can, because it just creates incredible tailwinds for your career, and it will sort of serve you like literally for the rest of your career. So I recommend putting in the extra work to the extent that you can, as much as possible. But you sort of try to get in where you can get in. The cost is like basically the same, and you're going to spend a lot of money, more than, I mean, I guess it sort of depends on your situation. A lot of my clients do get scholarships, but even with a $50,000 scholarship, it's still incredibly expensive to go to these schools. And so the cost is very similar. And so I would invest to get into the best school you can. All right, let's see what else. What do schools? Another question about scoring really high on the GMAT. I would say it helps a little bit. You will not get in for a high GMAT score by any stretch of the imagination. So if I had to choose somebody with a low GMAT score who had a very thoughtful narrative that highlighted core aspects of their personality, and it resonated with me 24 hours after I read it, and they had a lot of introspective thoughts around their career narrative, what they needed, what they lacked, how they would utilize the program, like I would take that night, like every single time. I would bet on that person. And like I've done this enough to see those people get admitted like time and time again. I think let's see. Um, you can this if you're interested in using this code, you have any questions, like just send me a message on Leland on the chat, and I'm happy to help work through it with you. How does your prior experience play into your application is an outstanding question. The answer is it needs to fit in that whole narrative. So your career narrative should be like a straight line. Like you shouldn't have any gaps or major like holes. So like the example that you gave, Daisy, is like an MBB internship. My question would be, what did you learn in that MBB internship, and how's that informing what you want to do short term after the MBA and what you want to do long term? So it needs to sort of fit together like a very cohesive narrative. Catherine, does it reflect poorly on you if you apply to a deferred program and a master's degree at the same school? I'm assuming this is not at the same time, correct? Or this is at the same time? I would say it does not reflect poorly on. Oh, at the same time, and they're both business programs. Like likely they wouldn't. They would be reviewed by different folks. But honestly, I will say, like, to answer your question, Catherine, like it doesn't matter. So like I've supported folks who are applying to the 2-year GSB program and then they're applying to the 1-year MSX, and it doesn't matter. I see folks like they'll do one and then apply to another one later. It doesn't matter. Yeah. What's the best time of year to visit schools prior to applying? I recommend I mean, the best time of year, honestly, when school's in session is what I would say. Like, so you can connect with as many students as possible. Probably like not in like October, November during recruiting because the students will be super busy. Um, but like right now is a great time. Most of the students will all have their internship like the spring. They'll be available to you. You can visit the schools, and then that can like you can use all that information, everything you've learned, contacts you made to sort of inform your narrative that you're writing in the fall. Um, there's a question around how many years after undergrad, Matt, and honestly, like they like to see a couple years of work experience. But I've helped folks get in with 2 years of work experience, and I've helped folks get in with 8 years of work experience. So I would say like in that range is very doable. Um, should I have a GMAT score before starting to work with a consultant? This is a very personal question that's hard for me to answer. I have clients who want my help around GMAT strategy, which I volunteer as part of this comprehensive package. I scored 770 on the GMAT, so I'm happy to spend some time talking with you about how to study and hold you accountable and sort of work through the process with you if you would like, just as part of the comprehensive approach. I also have clients who want to sort of nail the score, and then once they have that in the bag, then they're ready to start investing in the application. So it's Julian, it's really a personal preference thing, and I work with it's really whatever's best for you. Um, any other questions? I'm happy to stay a couple more minutes. I hope I think folks have already. Maybe we'll start dropping off. So let me just say thank you, so much for joining. And I wish you all the best of luck. I love this process so much, and would love to work with some of you. So reach out if you have any other questions or if I can do anything to help. And I'm happy to stick around if anyone has any lingering final questions. Uh, Bakul, I would wait for round one if at all possible. Uh, if you like reapplying next cycle with new I would wait for if you're up for waiting for round one, this may not be what you want to hear, but honestly, I would wait for round one. It's very hard to get in round three. And if you apply for round three, I probably would not recommend uh, investing. I mean, I'm happy to sort of help you, but you need to think about sort of the cost benefits trade-off because a very qualified applicant who would have gotten admitted in round one will get rejected in round three simply because they already have that profile. And then you're going to be in round one, you're going to be trying to retell your story around like why things are different this time. And so I recommend, is it easier to get in round one compared to round three? For divert applicants as well. It is easier, but it's not nearly as it's much easier to get in for round three as a deferred applicant than as a full-time applicant or a traditional applicant. 3.3, a decent GPA in undergrad. Should I aim for a lower ranked school? I mean 3.3. I've helped folks get in with much lower GPAs. If that answers your question, people get admitted all the time that I work with under a 3.3 GPA. To M7 schools. Part of it depends on the school you went to, and part of it depends on your GMAT or GRE score, but it's absolutely possible. Any other questions? It's a good question, Daisy. How much the interview is weighted in the process? It's a very important component. It's the only opportunity they have to sort of like really get to know your personality and kind of do the EQ check. Um, so it's very important. I tend to when I work with folks, I really advise them like honestly like don't focus too much on the interview up front. Like let's get your application flawless and very comprehensive and to the point where I'm like I would be shocked if you didn't get an interview. And then we focus on the interview. On this comprehensive package too, just to give you all a sense, like I've never had a client do a comprehensive package with me and not get into one of their schools. So it absolutely works. And the application process, there is a certain amount of certainty around it, such that we can have a very high degree of confidence whether you will get at least an interview or not, and then based on how the interview goes, kind of see from there. Um, uh, I also think, Bakul, the other thing you need to consider is even like the quality of applicant too could be different, right? Across the different rounds. Uh, Round one with a less prepared application, round two with a fully polished application, round two with a fully polished application every time. Uh, for the deferred programs they want to review after the final deadline. Is that wrong? It does not. Yeah, it doesn't matter nearly as much what round you apply to for deferred applicants, as I mentioned before. What are some of the red flags in the application that the admissions notice? Oh my gosh, there's it's kind of a lot of the things I talked about. So it could be feeling like you're not going to have be able to keep up on the academics, feeling like you don't really know what you want in your career, or they're not convinced that you're going to actually be able to achieve it. The narrative doesn't make sense. Feeling like you don't really have that much self-awareness around what you need or how you would benefit from the program. Feeling like you don't have leadership potential. Um, uh, don't work well with other people. Don't play nice. Wouldn't do well in team settings. Uh, 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 don't really understand integrity or have awareness around diversity or why it's important. Um, have ethical concerns. You've done something through the application process that uh, was ethically shady or concerning. Um, Feel like they have a million of your like honestly probably the biggest reason people get rejected is because they already have your profile. So like the most important thing you can think about is like how you can differentiate yourself, and this comes to down to showcasing your personality and thinking about the quality of your essays and how you can bring a creative narrative. Because like if you're a consultant, I mean so many consultants are applying to all these schools. If you're an investment banker, like so many investment bankers, if you're an entrepreneur, so it's like what is sort of unique and distinct and how will you contribute to the class in a meaningful way? That question like invariably has to be clear. How clear of a vision do we need about exactly what we're doing in future career? You need a clear narrative around it, Daisy. So I would think about it. I will say like they're not going to hold you to the narrative. So if your career ambitions change or you're still exploring things, that's totally fine. But you do need to help them understand like what your aspirations are from a career perspective. That's really important. Um, Common challenges for international students in MBA programs. That is an excellent question, Gokul. I will say oh, okay. We got a heart for it, so I'll talk about it a little bit. Just to be clear, are you asking about the program or about the application process, or both? So during the application process, I would say I think there could be some cultural differences in international students that I've worked with. Some cultures, folks that I've worked with, it's not as customary for you to sort of like be self-aggrandizing or talk about your achievements. That's considered culturally unacceptable, and that's kind of an expectation in the MBA process. So I think like I would be mindful of sort of some of the cultural differences. going through the process just to make sure that you're not giving yourself like a disadvantage because you're almost being like too humble than sort of your peers will be. Um, I would say in the MBA process, by far the part that I saw was the hardest for some of the international peers that I had was during the recruiting process. Like you need to find an employer that will sponsor you if you want to stay in the country. This is for U.S. schools and specifically my experience at Chicago Booth. So that was like a challenge sometimes for folks. And then I think there's other challenges around like funding the paying for the program, sort of how that process works for international students. So happy to kind of talk about any of these or some of the other like more nuanced points if you want to chat offline on the platform as well. All right, maybe I'll stop here. Thank you all so much. I've enjoyed this. Hopefully you found this helpful. Please reach out with any other questions that you have. I'm around and love working with folks. So happy to help however I can. And best of luck going through the process. Take care, everyone.